call this meeting to order with a moment of silence and then a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Santiago, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Eleanor Barrett,
Yes. Present.
Andre Green,
Here.
Laura Patone,
Present.
Alana Krepshin,
Here.
Sarah Phillips, Matt McLaughlin,
Here.
Mayor Curtatone, Emily Ackman,
Here.
Carrie Norman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much for that. I also wanted to say welcome to everyone. I know it's been if you had a summer, it might feel odd and it's an odd start to the year, but to our families, our students, our educators, and our staff, thank you for making the best of what is an unbelievably complicated and sometimes confusing and frustrating state that the world is in right now. So I particularly as a parent, I want to really thank the educators. I can tell you the warmth and the confidence that educators have conveyed to students and families has been reassuring. So that is, as a parent and on behalf of the school committee, I just wanted to extend a huge thank you. And the first item is the report of the student representatives. And Ms. Santiago, I don't see Kat and Natalia. Were you able to, have you spoken with them yet tonight?
Natalia's on the call. She is
She is.
under attendees, but she is
Okay.
on the call, and Kat should be joining us shortly.
Okay. Well, you know that, should we wait for Kat? Do we know if she's coming soon?
They are both on the call.
Fantastic. All right. Well, you know what? There's nothing I love more than hearing from our students. And so I want to welcome back Natalia and Kat as our student representatives. And so item number 2 is a report of our student representatives. I would love to hear from you both. First, how are you doing? How was your summer, the start of the year from a student perspective? Welcome. Do they need to be unmuted?
Natalia is self-muted. I'm not sure if she could hear us.
Natalia, can you unmute yourself if you can hear us? Because you're unmuted on our
hear
end.
me?
Yes.
Hello. Hi.
It's so nice to hear your voice. Is Kat with us too?
Yes, I texted her and she should be. I don't know if she's having any difficulties right now.
Natalia, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, hello everyone. It's nice to see you guys. Hope you all had a great summer. I had for the most part, a good summer. So the first thing I kind of want to mention, so I'll be talking a little bit about some things I've heard from the student body about online and remote learning, and then Kat also has her part as well. So a little bit about remote learning is that the Somerville High School students have felt a little strange, kind of getting back into it, which is totally understandable. Some have expressed how they do not like having classes after 2:30 since that is like the usual time we all get out. And then some have worried about learning like math at home because they don't have the teacher present to be able to help them on the spot to have that connection between teacher and student. Also, some have asked me questions about Block 7 and how that's going to work, because sometimes it does go past that 2 o'clock mark where it starts going towards 3. I know some students have like mandatory classes and then some don't, so there's a little bit of students just don't like seeing that. At least
Yep.
that's what I've heard. And then
And we had,
besides that, I haven't heard any other complaints. I think it's very close to what we did at the end of the school year. So, and then I also wanted to mention something that I have been part of, which is the Sunrise Somerville group here. So the
can you
Sunrise
tell us
Somerville
what
group.
that is?
So it's run by SHS students. This group aims to combat climate change by informing students about climate change and how students can use their voice to spread awareness, as well as inform others on how we could vote for certain people and certain laws that could then help climate change. So I've only been to 2 meetings so far. It's very new. So if you guys want to check out what we're up to, we have an Instagram account. It's Sunrise Somerville. So I just wanted to put it out there. And then that's all I have to report for the path.
That is a lot. And first of all, how exciting that students again from Somerville are becoming active, both within the school, but also in the greater political world, democracy, voting. It matters. It matters so much. And we have the presidential election this year. We have local elections next year. There is a lot going on. And I think what we've discovered, we already knew, but I think COVID has really highlighted, is that your local government it matters too, right? Because when you don't have leadership at other levels, it becomes even more important. So I am thrilled that you are doing this. And before I was going to ask Assistant Superintendent Mazza if he could address some of your questions. Kat, are you with us yet? I didn't. She may be having.
Chair, are you waiting for me to answer, or do you want Kat to speak first?
I don't know if Kat's there. So, Mr. Mazza, if you could.
Can you hear us? She's unmuted and she's not muted herself.
Maybe while we're figuring that out, Mr. Mazza, if you could explain what the Class 7 is, the fluctuations at the high school level, but also speak to some. We haven't had a full week of regular high school yet, or any school. If you could speak to that question of how does a student, when they have a question, particular, Natalia mentioned math, how is it going to be both instruction for the class and individual help, individual student support?
Could you just repeat the last part? You faded out a little bit. I just didn't hear that last part. I'm sorry.
So there's the question of what Block 7 is and how that fluctuates, but also in terms of when we're teaching remotely, that if a teacher teaches a lesson, how then will there be either individual student support or small group work done, especially in something like math, where it really is, you need to be able to do some of it to be able to figure out what you know and what you don't know.
Sure. I'll start with that through you. So the support piece, I mean, it's a great question, right? You have your teacher teaching the class. You need a little additional support. How do you make that happen? I think one of the pieces is we need to work with our counselors to create a schedule that works for you so you can get that support. Obviously, you can't get the same support when the teacher is teaching, a lesson. But I think really looking at finding places within schedules that you can carve out for that support. It's going to take a little creativity on everyone's part, because I know most of the high school student schedules are pretty full, even though there's a few, few classes one week and then you have 3 classes another week. But I think the support piece, I would say talk with the counselors, and let's make sure that we can fit that into your schedules. I mean, we can also look at, tutoring opportunities if need be. But we want to make sure that, if you do have questions, if you do need support, that you can get it sooner than later. So that way we're not falling too far behind. I think that's an important piece. I think Block 7 was a creative way for teachers to allow for some of that support to happen. We know it runs a little bit, the class is a little bit shorter than the other blocks, but the teachers are looking for ways that they can provide support and give students an opportunity to have advisory, to do some creative things as well. So, within Block 7, again, I think it comes down to, what students need at the end of the day.
Okay. And I think, Natalia, correct me if you're wrong, I think part of the question was at the high school where classes are in 90-minute blocks.
Right.
Will there be time during those 90 minutes when we have a more typical week for some individual student work with the teacher, or maybe a teacher breaking into a smaller group, or if it's a class that's also supported by a para? How will those blocks of time be used?
Sure. Yeah, through you, Chair Norman. I think that's right. I think the reason for the longer blocks is to build those supports in as needed, and to really allow teachers to break classes into smaller groups, because we know that's when, the true learning happens. And teachers, one-on-one relationships or in small groups allow students to master skills, ask live questions, get live feedback, more so than you would in a class of 25. So I think within the 90-minute block, there are ample opportunities for teachers to split the class into several groups so that a teacher can rotate from group to group, allowing students to get that support on a daily basis.
Thank you. Natalia, does that answer your question? Does that give you some more information?
For the most part, yes, but I also have a question on.
Absolutely.
So we do our classes on Zoom, and when we break out into groups, we can't break up into like 4 or 5 people because of they've told us that the students need to be supervised, and then each individual kid is kind of separated into their own breakout room. And then that kind of takes a little longer for the teachers to get to one student, then the next, and the next, and the next. And then by the time he gets back to you or she, you might have already forgot your question or maybe more confused, and then you run out of time. So in what ways can we make that better, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, through your chair, no, it does make sense, and I totally understand where you're coming from. I think this is new for everybody. The idea of, instead of breakout rooms, you have individual rooms, or basically waiting rooms, where you're doing some work, waiting for your teacher to come and answer your questions, work with you individually, while the teacher is working with a small group. One of the suggestions I have is, if you do have a question when you are in a waiting room, I would write it down just so you have it. Because and I think teachers are trying to figure out and navigate the complexity of having a small group and then getting to individual students. I think as time goes on, I think it will get more efficient. It'll be easier. And teachers will be able to navigate the small group and then move to individual students a lot quicker. But again, I would write some things down just to have them, because it's important that you're able to ask your question. And we don't want you to forget your question, because it might, lead to a different question down the road with basically what you're working on right now. So does that help at all?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Love your question.
One last question. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I heard from another student that Block 7 will continue being remote learning, even though we're back. Let's say we're back in school. That Block 7 would continue being online. Is that true or false?
Through you, Chair Norman, through you, there is a possibility that it will remain remote, and I think if it does, it really allows for greater flexibility for both students and staff to create, authentic learning experiences. More so than everybody coming together in one space. You can actually be in your own space, learning in a different capacity. So there is a possibility, yes.
There's also, and Mr. Mazza, correct me if I'm wrong, so for those of you who are not familiar with the high school schedule, the high school will be doing 1 week A, which will have three classes, longer blocks, and a week B. And then there is block 7, which will meet 4 times for a shorter period of time in both weeks. The other part about it, Natalia, is getting back to this is a health concern. So because block 11 runs on both the A week and the B week, so if we wind up going back in different cohorts, it would cross over that, and I think some of the concern will be a mixing of students, trying to minimize it. And again, a lot of this we will know more when we know which students want to remain remote. There's a lot of logistical pieces to this, but you're right to question, why is this one class potentially still remote?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question. And it affects a lot of students. So thank you for asking that. Sure, Norman, you are spot on.
Thank you. Kat, are you with us? And did you want to add anything or?
Can you hear me this time?
Yes, absolutely. You have the floor, my friend. It's so nice to hear your voice.
It is nice to see you all as well. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to come back and check in because I don't think I'll be a student representative this year, unfortunately. But it's good to be able to check in with you guys about, how the summer went for us SHS students and how we're taking the reopening. So thank you guys for having me. I apologize earlier. I was on the phone call and it wasn't working, but I'm here now.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I want to reinforce everything Natalia said. She hit the nail on the head with what she said. I think that what Mr. Mazza said really clarified to me what the remote 7 was, because I think I was personally confused about what the remote 7 was because I had never heard of Michael Rowley, Mr. Rowley, who is my counselor for that. So I was a little bit confused as well. But this clarifies it, that I think that, I'm seeing that teachers do want to give a lot of area for support, which is amazing. I will give the general feedback that I've heard from students before we reopened the school and we were just doing online learning in the beginning of the quarantine. I think that a lot of kids were worried because they thought that online school was going to be distracting or it was going to be difficult, with kids that have multiple siblings or just have a noisy environment. I think that was one of the biggest concerns, but giving all students access to Chromebooks really helped with that. There's no excuse not to show up, right? And I think that we're all been a little bit forced to take control of our own education because, no one's going to tell me to get off my phone if I have my camera off and I'm muted, and no one can tell if I'm just, paying attention to the bird outside my window or if I'm actually listening to what the teachers are saying. So I think that a lot of us have had to take a lot of control over our own education and our own learning, which is not easy for any of us. But with the reopening, something I did see was there was a lot of confusion about the new classes, the new stuff, which is why I think it's a good idea that we had a whole week for orientation at the high school. I think that's helped people find the Zoom links and people understand their schedules and all this and all that. And I've been personally emailing Mr. Rishal nonstop to try to figure out what's going on. So I think that the support groups have definitely helped. People on my Snapchat, my social media, people were asking me mostly about the teacher mentors. And I personally am still a little bit confused about what as to what a teacher mentor is, but that was the biggest thing that I heard. What is a teacher mentor? What is this person doing? Why am I assigned this person and that person? So I think that was the biggest thing that I heard from other people. Another thing for me, I'm a senior. I only have to take 20 credits and I have a lot of gaps in my schedule. I think people were confused about that and about remote 7 the thing that I saw with Remote 7 was not only is it going to continue to be this way after, if we go back to school, like physical campus, and also what time is it going to be? Because I have a class that's Remote 7, but it's from 8 to 9 instead of from 2 to 3. So those are the biggest things that I found. I've been mostly, emailing Rochelle to figure this out, but I think the one thing that I will ask to the committee is what can I tell the students when they ask me, what is a teacher mentor?
Through you, Chair Norman. So when the high school staff was, planning, building schedules and planning for, this reopening, they were trying to figure out a way to have each student have an adult in the building that they could connect with on a daily basis, someone that they could go to really just have a conversation, knowing that high school students are extremely busy, but they wanted to provide at least one adult to have a communication, have a relationship with. And I think that is so important because with high school students' schedules being so busy and, after school schedules, there's never really time to make that connection with adults in high school. And I'll be honest with you, this is, one of the first times that I've heard about this kind of mentoring program in a high school. I've heard in elementary and middle schools, but at a high school, I think it takes on a whole different level of complexity, but it's necessary. And I think it's a little startling for students because you're not used to, you have a person that you specifically can go to that's not your guidance counselor, or an assistant principal, but it's someone really to form a relationship with and someone that will be there if you need to have a conversation. And we think it's important. Those relationships are crucial, especially now with, everything being remote. And we want to make sure that all students are comfortable, with the person that they have. And again, it will take work to build that relationship, but we think, students in high school really have the capacity to do that. And so does the staff. They were very excited about this. About building relationships with students. And I think it's going to be an incredible thing, but it will take time to get off of the ground.
And let me just add to that. And Kat and Natalia, you are so good at asking questions and knowing, and I applaud that, and not just for yourself, but on behalf of other students. The mentor, I think, is also, there are so many questions about the schedule and how do I do this? And this is new to everybody. Right? There was no pandemic education textbook handed out. So, I applaud all of our teachers, and this is about the high school, the mentors. It comes from a place of wanting to have give students as much access to adults to ask questions, to check in with, and that's why it was created. In particular this year right now when we are remote and will be, earlier at the town hall, the mayor was saying December 1st would be the earliest that we open the buildings, and then the rest of the meeting was to describe all of the different steps that need to happen. So that's where it came from, is a real, because we're not, you're not walking down the hall and running into Ms. Brewster Cook where you can just ask her a question. So these relationships, these questions, these have to be much more intentionally set up. And especially some students are not as, they asking questions, asking for help doesn't come as easily. And so if there's already this designated relationship, we're hoping that will alleviate that. We don't want any student to be left, or any family to be like, if you have a question, to ask it. And if you don't know who, the mentor is a great place to start. If you have a good relationship with another teacher or your guidance counselor, this doesn't, you don't have to go to the mentor. It's just to give students another option, and also to have another adult who's checking in on you, just making sure, do you still have your connectivity? Are you looking at your senior? What are you thinking about for next year? Because it's going to look, your senior year is going to look so different. You already know that. So that's really the thinking behind it.
And Chair Norman, if I could just make one more comment. Kat, you bring up a great point about, nobody's going to tell you to get off of your cell phone and off of Snapchat and things. And I think one of the things that the teachers and all the adults at the high school did is when they were looking at creating this program for everyone, they first did it from a teacher perspective, but then they also looked at it from a student perspective. So they could tell, okay, is this going to work for students? And anything that they did, they vetted through a student lens because they wanted to make sure that what they did represented, what students wanted as far as an education at the high school, given it being remote. Because, student voice, I mean, we're really, really, big on that. We think it's so important to hear from you. What's working, what's not working, what do you need so we can improve your experience and the other students' experiences, at the high school and make it really authentic and something that really is transformative for you as you graduate and move on to, higher learning. So, I can't thank them enough, but also the student body. I mean, this is not an easy thing to come back to, if you can say come back to, and it's going to take work on both ends, but I really want to thank all of the students at the high school for being prepared, coming back to school with this reopening that is so different than what we're used to, and we always want to hear feedback. So we're so happy that you came forward with what happened over the summer and the start of the school year, because we need to know if things aren't working so we can change them. So thank you.
No problem.
Do
Thank
either,
you.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, no problem, and thank you for your answers. It's come across that the biggest reason for all, the remote 7 classes and the teacher mentors and this counselor and that counselor has just been to give us support. I will just bring up lastly that as you mentioned, if you do have someone in the room in the high school that you trust and you can go to. I personally, have my people that I've created bonds with. I can personally go to Miss Mosby or Mr. Jabor or Mr. Rashaw. I've just gotten along really well with. So, as you said, like there are relations that exist, and it's become clear to me that a teacher mentor is just an additional support. I'm just wondering if there's a possibility that in case like the relation just doesn't work out, or there's just some complication, or there's a history, or there's, I don't know, whatever it is, would students hypothetically be able to change their student mentor? Because that's something that I've heard with my participation in the BSU. I feel a lot of students to me, they weren't happy with their school counselor and they wish they could change it, but it was just never an option to them. So I'm wondering, as you said, like the teacher mentor may not be as influential or may not be as necessary as, for example, a counselor, but if that were necessary, would there be an option to change one's teacher?
Through you, Chair Norman. Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think the last thing, that anyone wants is a relationship that's not working, but yet we have to continue, with it for the remainder of the school year. I think, the important focus is on building that relationship, that positive relationship. So if things aren't necessarily working, the way that they're supposed to, there should be an opportunity to, change. Absolutely.
How could students?
We are 2 days in, my friend, and
Okay.
so I love that you brought up the question, and so I don't think we considered it yet. I think can we get back to you at the next meeting and make sure, Superintendent Skipper, just to make sure that you heard the question was about what are these the mentors? Do they preclude me going to someone else who I may already have an established relationship with? No. And then what if it's not a good mix? Is there a way to change it up?
Yeah. So hi, first of all, hi to our student reps. Another good year coming up. My recommendation would be to have a conversation with Principal Lagambina to start. Principal Lagambina and the staff co-developed what, including the teachers, co-developed what the mentor program would look like. And I'm sure that they factored into their thinking situations where there might not be a compatibility between the mentor and the students. So I think it would be good to start with Mr. Lagambina. I've also alerted him and let him know that the question came up. So I would just, I'm going to ask him to reach out to you both tomorrow. Sound good?
Yes, thank you so much. And I
You're
apologize for like
No, I
jumping
know
with
it's
that.
interesting because it actually shows, typically you would just go down and knock on Mr. Lagambina's door and you would know where to find him. But it brings up the issue if you have a question like this, how do you go about finding Mr. Lagambina? So I think we can help with this one.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck with the studies this week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you two. We rely on you to convey the student's perspective and questions and concerns. And it's always, I know I speak for the entire school committee, hearing from the students is always the highlight of any meeting. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I wanted to pop in before they popped off. Is that all right?
Oh, sure. Ms. Patone, you have a question?
I apologize. It's first of all, I wanted to applaud the students, and I think you spoke to this, Carrie, Ms. Norman, is that they really clued in on a couple of things that students and families are really confused about. In particular, the mentors, which I think both Mr. Mazza and Ms. Norman did an excellent job describing, but I really would ask that there was some follow-up communication with all the student populations, as well as maybe the parents, about what this role is and how can we best take advantage of it. And, another question that came up that I thought that there was some more work going on was about pursuing whether or not teachers at the high school level could, and what was that?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I was talking about the using breakout Zoom. Can you not hear me?
No, it's like
No, it's getting,
I'll type
now you're
it
crazy.
and you can read it if you want.
Okay. Oh, and Eleanor, I was not looking at the chat. Ms. Barish, did you also have a question? Okay. Laura,
breakouts in Zoom for high school, wasn't there? Yes, I can take that.
Superintendent, please. And can
So,
you
is it
say the
okay?
question for the audience? Yes.
Yeah, Norman. So the question is about breakouts in Zoom for high school students. Wasn't there work being done to look into that? So we're looking into this with our legal team. Right now, breakouts are supervised. We're looking at the possibility at the high school level of having a permission that parents can sign off on or let us know if they have a concern for breakout rooms at the high school age students to be able to do breakout rooms without the teacher. And, much like a classroom where students will be in small groups and the teacher will rotate through the small groups, they don't hear all the dialogue that goes on in the small group, but they're constantly popping in and out of it. Very similarly on Zoom, to have them be able to go in and out of the breakouts. So we are working actively with the high school team as well as with our legal team, and we hope to have an update on that in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Ms. Barish, did you also have a question about the student report?
I did. Thanks so much. I just wanted to find out, I guess, through you, Chair, to Mr. Mazza. Are the mentors to stay with the students throughout their 4 years, or is this going to change on a year-by-year basis?
Through you, Chair Norman, I will check and get back to you on that because I'm not sure, but I want to give you an accurate answer.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Superintendent, did you want to say anything at the now 7:45 top of our meeting?
So, we just left a town hall that was really well attended, and we shared some important information that there'll be slides that will be put up on the websites. It was really to talk about the work that's been done on the city side with the buildings, to do a very thorough evaluation of the building as one of the conditions we need to meet for a safe and healthy environment for all. We talked about, as part of that process, that December 1st is the deadline right now, that we're looking to be able to bring the buildings online. Each building has gone through a metric of risk analysis, looking at everything from air filtration, to air flow and exchange, to humidity. And the goal is to move all of the buildings out of the category they're currently at for risk, which in most cases is a moderate risk level, and move the building into the low risk level, which is for ASHRA, they're the acceptable range. We also had an update from Health and Human Services and the city around COVID testing and some progress that's been made with a partnership with Broad relative to being able to have that operationalized for in-person return. So I would just encourage the audience to go and look at the slides if they were not able to join, and then certainly we can look to see if we can represent some of that information from the city side at one of the upcoming school committees.
And will that slide deck be, it's on the city, will be on the city side, will it also be on the Somerville Public Schools website?
I believe it'll likely be a link on our side to theirs.
Right.
Is my
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, and with that, we are going to go on to item number 3, which is public comment. Hi, Sam. I just realized I did not read the blurb at the beginning of the meeting, so I'm going to get all my official, I should have said at the top of the meeting, and my public comment all taken care of right now. Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GCL 30A S18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtitone's declaration of emergency dated March 15, 2020. Excuse me. This meeting of the Somerville School Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels, SCAT. And then at the top of public comment, I also need to read this, so bear with me. At the start of each regular school committee meeting, individuals or groups of representatives will be invited to address the school committee. The length of this public comment would ordinarily be 20 minutes in length. I'm going to we'll likely go over that, but I'm going to limit speakers to 2 minutes tonight. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present the material. The presiding chair may permit extension of this time. Additionally, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak, and a group of residents appearing at a meeting to express favor or opposition to a particular agenda item is encouraged to designate one member of the group as a spokesperson to be heard on the topic. Other members of the group may be heard if they feel they can contribute additional information regarding the topic. Improper conduct and remarks will not be allowed. Defamatory or abusive remarks are always out of order. If a person continues to disrupt the meeting after a clear warning, the chair has authority to order the person to leave, and authorities may be called per Massachusetts open meeting law. All remarks will be addressed through the chair of the meeting, and the school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility. Under most circumstances, administrative channels are the proper means for disposition of legitimate complaints involving staff members. And written comments may be presented to the school committee before and after the meeting for the school committee members' review and consideration. And the public is also encouraged to submit their comments in writing. You can send them to the central office. There, that's it. So, the speakers tonight, I'm going to read a list of 3 at a time so that you are ready. You will each get 2 minutes. When you are given the floor, if you can give your name and your home address, that would be helpful. So the first 3 speakers are Amy Marinville, Danielle Latanya, and then Annie March. Amy, you have the floor.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. My name is Amy Moranville. I have 2 young children, both autistic, who are both going to and have been in public schools here in Somerville. When schools shut down in March, the goal was to flatten the curve so the hospitals didn't get overwhelmed, and we did that, and we know what it takes to keep risk low. In contrast, we do not know how to safely provide resources and support for special needs kids outside of school. Our children are suffering, they are struggling, and the schools are failing them. Keeping children, especially those with special needs, out of school is not tenable, especially considering that A, young children still need to be cared for, many of them outside of their homes, so school closures are not preventing children from exposure to others, and B, COVID is just one of the dangers facing our kids this fall. There are other dangers, including massive social regression, extreme trauma from loss of educational support and learning, and the seemingly endless slog through a situation without clear goals or end dates. When we all started this journey in March, the reasoning was clear and the expectations understood. Now that situation has unraveled and debates continue between the stakeholders with no clear end in sight. As such, I believe that a decision maker should be identified who will be the final decider for reopening. This person should have the knowledge of the science required to create safe spaces and leadership ability to lead Somerville through this mess. Right now, we have boards and committees and political leaders and no clear singular voice telling us what will need to be done. This czar should be someone for whom success is implicitly connected with school reopening, not a superintendent or a mayor, but a person who will be the liaison for all parties, someone who is a point person for collecting information and making final decisions. Somerville has a rat czar. Why do we not have a school czar? I request that we discuss why tents and other outside spaces aren't an option. I request that SPS acknowledge that the school district is failing to provide services for early special education. Virtual systems are not a substitute. There is no way to meet the necessary standards without in-person therapy and support. And I request that those priorities be readjusted to consider the definite and immediate harm being caused every day to the most vulnerable among us. Thank you.
Next is Danielle Latanya, and then Annie March, and then Allison Goodman. Danielle, you have the floor.
Hi, my name's Danielle Lantine, 234 Summer. My kids are third grade and pre-K, both now withdrawn from Somerville Public Schools. I sit on international COVID committees discussing COVID transmission routes. Tonight, we heard to reopen schools. We are planning for a worst case theoretical, aerosol transmission events from young children. Note this worst case situation isn't supported in epidemiological data, but to plan for this theoretical, we need to do extensive mitigation measures, masking, social distancing, hand washing, surface disinfection, surveillance testing of K-12s, potting, extensive HVAC repairs. To be clear, I know of no other school anywhere in the world that is planning for this. This is unique worldwide. And as some of these measures take extensive time and resources, it is now clear remote in Somerville is long-term, with the first students potentially returning December 1st. Thus, I have 3 requests. 1, be transparent. Remote schooling is no longer only an emergency measure, but instead for many families could be for much or all of this school year. 2, understand there's knowledge from across the world, not just the US, on how to safely reopen schools. If Somerville is remote long-term in a low transmission setting, we are unique, and we will be conducting an experiment on our students. 3, understand remote learning is less effective than in person and is intensely difficult for our at-risk populations, ELL, SPED. For these populations, long-term lack of services could have lifelong impacts in regression, dropout rates, learning and earning potential. To end, I don't give a Somerville rat's behind if SPS offers my children anything this academic year. However, as a community, we are morally and ethically obligated to provide services to our most at-risk populations. And it is a failure of political leadership if we fail to do this in a timely manner. Thank you for your time and for all your work.
Thank you. The next up is Annie March, then Allison Goodman, and then Elizabeth Gaskell. Annie March, you have the floor.
Awesome. I just got unmuted. It's Annie March. Address? Do we give addresses still?
Yes, please.
Okay, 29 Berkeley Street in Somerville, our beautiful city. Those were some awesome comments that preceded me. I wanted to let y'all know that my second grader had an awesome first day. It went really, really well. And I wanted to say thank you to everybody who made that possible that's on this call, because I've listened to a lot of your calls and I know you guys do a lot all the time. one of the things that was awesome is that his teacher had this nifty camera that showed her desktop, not her computer desktop, but her physical desktop. And we could see her turning pages and writing things. And I really want that for my 4-year-old next week. And I don't know if he'll have it. I don't know if his teacher has it. But it would be great to have that to show manipulatives to like little pre-K kids. I think it would make a huge difference. There were problems with camera angles and things last spring. So I'm saying I'd like to request that. Also, I want to say my kid is non-ELL. He's non-SPED. He's a white middle-class boy with a mom who can pay a lot of attention to him. And he had an awesome first day, but I'm concerned about all those who did not have an awesome first day. Okay. Oh, also, please don't have a town hall and a school committee meeting on the same night again. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you for that, in particular, the last comment. So next is Allison Goodman, then Elizabeth Gaskell, then Gabrielle Jacquet. Allison Goodman, you have the floor.
Great. Hello, my name is Allison Goodman. I live at 15 Cutter Street, Unit 1 in East Somerville. I'm a mom to 2 kids, one in 2nd grade and one who is a 3.5-year-old, and she has significant special needs. She's in a self-contained classroom at the Capuano. She's been receiving early intervention and private therapy since she was 3 months old. Now it's been 6 months without real services. That's 15% of her entire life, and at an age where interventions are most critical. I'm feeling unsupported by the district. It's not enough to wait and see how virtual learning works in the fall for kids like mine. We know it doesn't work. It can't work despite the heroic efforts of her awesome teachers and therapists. It was understandable during the surge when COVID was in the community at an extraordinary rate, and we knew very little about it. Now we know a lot about transmission and risk and PPE, and community levels are really low. I just beg the district to talk to families like mine, show some urgency and creativity, involve the scientists. I know everyone is working hard, but it's truly not hyperbole to say that my daughter's future depends on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Elizabeth Gaskell, then Gabrielle Jacquet, and then Rana McLaughlin. Elizabeth, you have the floor. Elizabeth, are you there? Does she need to be unmuted?
Elizabeth, you are self-muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Elizabeth, are you there and can you unmute yourself?
Chair Norman, do you want to move on to?
Yeah, let's
Gabrielle?
move on to, and I will put Elizabeth, we will call on her again at the end of the, to give her another opportunity. So next is Gabrielle, and then Rana, and then Elizabeth Pensky. So Gabrielle, you have the floor. Gabrielle, are you there? I can see the mic, but I can't, can anyone hear her? Shoot, I wonder what's, Gabrielle, oh, we cannot hear you.
Gabrielle, please try rejoining the meeting. We can move on to the next person and then try you when you're back. For some reason, we cannot hear you. And it may just be an audio issue on your computer.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. Rana McLaughlin, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? This is Gabrielle.
Oh, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had to unmute, but it kicked me out of the meeting to do that. Can you?
So
do you want me to wait?
Who is speaking now?
This is Gabrielle, but I could wait if you want me to.
No, why don't you go ahead? Are you?
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Gabrielle Jacquet. I live at 24 Appleton Street, and I have a first grader enrolled at the Brown, currently doing remote learning at the Somerville YMCA every day, and a 3.5-year-old at Somerville Preschool.
You're breaking up a little bit. We're having a hard time hearing you now. Oh, shoot. Gabrielle, we cannot hear a word you're saying. Maybe,
Can you hear me now?
now I can, yes.
Okay. Do I need to start again, or did you hear any of it?
We did not hear anything. I didn't, after YMCA, and you have another child at a daycare
Yeah.
center, and then we did not hear anything else.
Sorry about that. Okay. I am also an emergency physician at Boston Medical Center, a safety net hospital, and currently teaching in person at BU School of Medicine. We all acknowledge that school closures were necessary in March since we didn't understand what we were dealing with. And now, 6 months later, many of us have been back at work with our kids in organized group childcare settings. We now have information on what to do to prevent COVID, and we know that the disease isn't going away for a long time. Now it is time to stop and reassess the situation from a public health standpoint. At this point in time, I firmly believe school closures are doing more harm than good for our children. By keeping schools closed right now, we are not in fact reducing risk. We are instead pushing it out to groups that aren't unionized, such as remote learning centers, such as the YMCA where my daughter is, that often have 60 students in a room together with unknown HVAC and a teacher of unknown age and immunocompromised status. To quote someone from the town hall, we're rolling a different set of dice by doing this. Believe me, I would be happy to help facilitate remote schooling at my house if it were actually evidence-based and indicated. However, I really believe we're harming our most vulnerable for no evidence-based benefit to our teachers or any other group. On a macro level, as a public health practitioner and physician, I'm very distraught. At work, due to school closure, I've seen many exacerbations of mental illness and eating disorders, increased rates of child neglect and suicide. These numbers are delayed in being reported in the press, and so the data will not be available for a while. Watching my first grader on Zoom on Friday broke my heart because honestly, all that she and the other vulnerable kids at this age is all they need is social emotional development, safety, and security, and that cannot be provided on Zoom, no matter how hard everyone is working. As I saw for my own eyes, they cannot self-regulate their emotions on Zoom, learn how to share, take turns, interact with others, or become a contributing member of our Somerville community on Zoom. For what gain are we doing this? The public school systems of most other towns are letting our most vulnerable students return in person. Private schools are as well. Time is brain, as we know. It's time to listen to the science and stop sacrificing the children of Somerville for no evidence-based reason. I ask that you please consider the public health toll we're taking. The physical and mental health of our most vulnerable children is truly at risk. And as I currently contemplate withdrawing my first grader from SPS, I ask that you give us an actual return date for each group of students so that we can expect return to in-person learning at some time this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next up is Ronna McLaughlin, then Elizabeth Pinsky, and then Lauren Hittner. Ronna, you have the floor. She's still with us.
Hi, it's Ronna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we absolutely can. Welcome.
Great, thank you. So hi, I'm Ronna McLaughlin, 96 Rogers Ave in Somerville. I'm a mom of 2 kids, a pre-K that's going to stay at his full-time in-person private daycare since remote won't work for a 4-year-old, and first grader that was going to be going to Brown and is enrolled there and doing the remote schooling as of the past 2 days, but via the YMCA SACC program, as my husband is an essential worker and I have a demanding full-time job. This is a feminist issue. They are in full-time care. Why are these full-time in-person centers in very old buildings with no testing plans, low bars for HVAC, ventilation, that have been running for months in Somerville and have been so successful, not informing the Somerville strategy? For those under 40 years old, the flu is actually more deadly than COVID. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm just saying that. The flu is more deadly than COVID for under 4 years old. That's just a fact. It's not politics. Yet schools never closed for that. Instead, it seems the city has set an almost insurmountable bar with their approach to building ventilation. This new safety first mentality of our current administration when it comes to schools is becoming much more dangerous than the virus itself. What we are doing is subjecting a vulnerable population to the cruelest of experiments. We're seeing how long they can go without essential services and how much isolation and screen time over long durations the youngest can tolerate. The effects of this experiment that Somerville is embarking on will surely have many long-term unintended consequences, regression, poor mental health outcomes, and pushing our loved families out of the city, and loss of job satisfaction in our educators, who many of which severely want to return to the classroom, but as I've been told by several, are intimidated and harassed by a subset of their peers into silence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Elizabeth Pinsky, then Lauren Hittner, then Vera Silva, and then if Elizabeth Gaskell is back, we will have her be the last speaker. Rana, are you there?
Elizabeth Pinsky is the next person.
Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. It has been a very long day. Thank you for that, Ms. Santiago. Elizabeth Pinsky, you now have the floor. Elizabeth, are you with us? I see her. There we go. Elizabeth?
Can you hear me now? Yep.
Yes, we can.
You have me? Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Pinsky. I live at 27 William Street. I'm a pediatrician and a child psychiatrist at Mass General. I come at this problem from the angle of child mental health, development, and trauma. COVID is not the only threat to the health of Somerville's children. The mayor said tonight that he is not, quote, rolling the dice, unquote, with health in Somerville, and I agree. We are not rolling the dice. We are assuredly doing some children harm. We were already facing a child mental health crisis prior to the pandemic with escalating rates of self-harm and suicide. We know that isolation and loss of structure are leading to loneliness, anxiety, and depression. We also know that despite having the best teachers imaginable, the social and emotional needs of younger children simply cannot be met remotely. We know that for children with developmental disabilities, including children with autism, missing services has lifelong consequences, and we are planning to ask these children to wait 9 months to resume services if they live in Somerville, but not if they live in our neighboring cities and towns. That is damage that cannot be undone. I am frustrated by the lack of adequate public health and medical expertise in this planning process, and I understand that the mayor would like reopening to be exceptional in Somerville, and if there were data to support that plan, I would be in wholehearted agreement. But we cannot ask children with special needs, young children, and English learners to be patient without very good reason. These needs are urgent. We need a plan that is safe for teachers and staff and safe for our community. We do not need a plan that is better than Cambridge. We need more input from experts, infectious disease doctors, epidemiologists, and public health engineers, because they are telling us to get our most vulnerable children back. And I would beg the city, please involve these experts in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So it appears that Lauren Hittner's emailed in her comments, and did she not want to speak? I don't know if she's still here.
No, Lauren Hittner is on the call, Carrie. Vera Silva sent her comment in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Lauren, you have the floor now. I apologize. Lauren Hittner, are you there? Lauren, are you self-muted? Lauren, okay. So is Elizabeth Gaskell there? Can we go to her, give her one more chance to speak?
I'm muted. Hi, thank you
you-
so much. Sorry, I have a PhD in biochemistry and I can't work out how to use GoToMeeting. I really appreciate it. Can you hear me now?
We can. Can you give us your name and your address, please?
Yes, I'm Liz Gaskell at 35 Electric Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a mum to a West Somerville neighbourhood school first grader. I want to address the town hall statement about surveillance testing of staff and students. We all agree that testing and more testing is a good thing. Ensuring equitable access to fast turnaround diagnostic testing for symptomatic individuals should be our highest priority. However, I'm concerned that the plan for surveillance testing of asymptomatic students is beyond the bar set by other in-person learning establishments. I encourage us to think carefully about whether the positive impact of the proposed surveillance testing is worth delaying in-person learning. I want the committee to understand that surveillance testing of students requires a separate infrastructure to diagnostic testing, including an operational partner willing to test minors. This is in addition to the Broad providing the lab work, as Doug knows. It is also very costly due to the scale involved. To test everyone in SPS once per week is likely to cost about $500,000 a week. It is also unclear what the benefit of surveillance testing of students in our schools will be, but we can estimate that at our current rates of community transmission, we might expect to perform 6,000 tests every week to find one positive person in our schools. Professor Scarpino presented a helpful slide on viral load over time, but we must assume the one infectious person per week will be masked with a 6-foot distance, creating minimal opportunity for viral transmission. I fully support access to optional surveillance testing for staff. However, I argue that surveillance testing of students should be considered the icing on the cake of COVID mitigation measures and should not be a barrier to returning to in-person learning. In addition, if surveillance testing is mandated as opposed to optional, it's likely to cause delays to reopening with negligible impact. For example, has this been negotiated with the SDA? Most importantly, how does the mayor weigh up the merits of spending $500,000 a week on surveillance testing as opposed to providing for the immediate needs of students disproportionately negatively affected by remote learning now, such as special ed and ELL populations, and those families who are struggling financially? I suggest the district instead prioritize equitable access to fast turnaround diagnostic testing for symptomatic individuals and an optional surveillance program for staff. Should community transmission go up or the price and availability of testing come down, broader surveillance testing can be revisited. And thank you very much for staying awake this late and letting me speak.
Thank you. So, Ms. Santiago, is there anyone? Is Elizabeth Pinsky here and did she speak? She did. So we are now concluded. I'm sorry, it has been a very long.
Lauren Hittner is the last person on the call.
Lauren, I see her, but can you
hear me?
Lauren, yes, we can.
Yay.
Welcome.
Sorry, that was my fault. My name is Lauren Hittner. I live at 7 Park Place. I have a 2nd grader in Argenziano and a 4-year-old attending in-person preschool. I'm a pediatrician in a district north of the city where about 30% of my patients come from an urban setting similar to our own in Somerville. I haven't actually been able to be in this forum before because I work late on Monday nights completing physicals and corresponding forms required for in-person return to school. From the delays at the height of the surge, that means I've been really busy trying to meet those commitments that we made to our population to ensure that they're healthy and ready to return to school, because all the districts in my region are returning in some form. I spent a lot of time asking kids how school is going, and they've started before us. It has been about a week, but the experience mirrors my own in the past 2 days in Somerville. The kids who've started off only remote due to their choice or because they haven't had in-person school days yet are disappointed. They've shed a lot of tears. Their parents report they've shed their own tears. Families do not think they're getting services equivalent to their own prior IEP standards. Kids who have had their in-person days say to me unequivocally, it was weird, and then I can't wait to go back. They have forged connection with their teachers. They've stood 6 feet in the hallways, they've worn their masks, and they're ready to do it again. When at the height of the surge, healthcare providers asked everyone to stay home, we did as a community, and we listened and agreed that it was the right thing to do. When we brought this pandemic under reasonable control and your healthcare providers are saying, kids belong in school, we can do this safely. Look around you at the preschools and the open schools in low community transmission environments. We have plenty of evidence. Suddenly we've decided to go against advice and go it alone. And I really do mean alone. No other district that I'm aware of is trying to achieve so many layers of protection so as to put our children at the bottom of the list of people to protect. Protecting our kids means putting them first, lifting them up. It means recognizing that we have what it takes to put our most vulnerable children in school already. We only seem to lack the will to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our public comment speakers tonight. It's always good to hear from the public. So we are now moving on to item number 4, report of the superintendent. Superintendent Skipper.
Thank you, Chair Norman. Just in terms of the personnel report, there are 2 retirements. I'd like to, actually 3. Argenziano, a grade 4 C teacher, Carmen Chagas, for 33 years and 158 days of service. At the Healy, a special education teacher, Barbara Strell, at the end of this year, for 32 years of wonderful service. And at Somerville High School, health education teacher, Janet Flynn, and this is at the end of our school year, for 33 years of service. Just like to thank all of these educators for a wonderful career and all of the benefits that our students and our staff have received because they have been a part of our Somerville family. So to them, we thank them, and we'll recognize them for sure at the end of the year during our retirement celebration. And that is actually all. In terms of the reopening, just a few comments. I think I think in terms of the remote learning, our staff collectively is owed a great deal of appreciation and thanks for long days and hours across the board to be ready for the remote learning. We made a commitment when it was clear that we could not return initially in the hybrid in person to make sure that the remote learning could be as positive as possible and as full as possible. And that's the effort that we have tried to do. We've had excellent attendance and engagement in the first couple of days, relative to about 95%. We continue to resolve last minute kinds of issues relative to the technology. There will be some additional multilingual tech sessions that will take place at the East Somerville School. Anyone is invited, but it specifically will have bilingual supports. And that will take place 8 to 12 on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday and Saturday of this week. Many of the schools on Saturday continue to give resources out to families, and we'll do so again next Saturday. I think additionally, all of the preparation teachers have done both during the summer in terms of training, and then certainly in the first 12 days that were allocated from DESE to us, I think shows in their preparation of their classes, their excitement to see their students and their students' excitement to see theirs. There is no way to replace in-person learning, as I think all of the prior speakers have indicated, and I know we share that sentiment. But I think in terms of the remote, we're attempting to do our best while we continue to work with the city to resolve the building issues and the testing protocols to make the remote as robust and rigorous as possible. And just, just again, thank you to all of our staff for just exceptional work in these first couple of days to get everything launched.
Thank
We'll
you
have
so
a
much.
summer school presentation in the beginning of October. Just to remind, this was a modified summer school, obviously because of COVID, but we still had an extensive service menu for ELL learners, for our special education learners, and a reading program of a one-to-one reading using the digital tools. So with Ori Harrell and community schools. So all of that data is being pulled together and will be presented at the next school committee in October, which I believe is the first week of October, I believe.
I should know it. It is actually Monday the 5th.
Yes.
Yes. And then the following week is Indigenous People Weekend. Okay. Thank you. We look forward to that, and especially since it was an unusual summer. And does that conclude the superintendent's report?
It does today, yes.
Thank you so much for that. Moving on to item number 5, report of subcommittees, the school committee meeting for rules management. Dr. Ackman, actually, you have 2 reports. I don't know if you want to go through them both and then make a motion, or however you want to handle it.
I think technically I have 2 meetings to report out on. I'm not sure that I have both of those reports. So let me find, I apologize. Let me find the report that I do have, bring that up. And
is it in, oh, it's not in the handouts. Okay.
So the rules subcommittee report I do have is for September 16th, 2020. called to order at 4:23 p.m. with myself and Ms. Barish. Dr. Phillips arrived at 4:26. In attendance was Ms. Krepshin, Superintendent Skipper, and the Superintendent Fellow Iwasaki. In the audience was the Vice President of the STA, Megan Brady. We reviewed an amended version of policy EBC supplemental that was first discussed in the meeting on September 11th with additional language that was added by the superintendent and Mr. Iwasaki. The body decided to pull out the language around the attendance policy, which is a temporary addendum, and it was passed out of subcommittee as a standalone policy, which is JE, a temporary addendum, which will be addressed tonight. After further discussion, the body passed policy EBC supplemental out of subcommittee as it was originally proposed, with the additional statement of the superintendent will bring any substantial changes of policy to vote for the school committee, while minor alterations to policy as warranted do not need to be brought to the school committee. All motions were put forward by Ms. Barish and then seconded by Dr. Phillips. Each was passed unanimously. The meeting adjourned at 5:17 p.m. I can also offer a brief synopsis of the meeting which was before that. I'm trying to, or we can vote that out and I can have minutes the following in our next.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we take a vote on the report that you just provided? You can make a motion to accept and then we'll take a vote on that. And
okay. I move to accept the minutes.
Seconded by Eleanor.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. So there's a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Eleanor Barish. Is there any discussion or questions on that report? Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone, Ms. Barish,
Yes.
Ms. Batone,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
and Ms. Norman.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Dr. Ackman, would you like to we can put the report for the next one onto the next school committee agenda? Would that be, let's do that. Thank you so much. So then moving on to unfinished business, item number 6. I spoke with our attorney, Mike Long, who recommended that we hold off on the policy of JLCB, the immunization policy. He wanted to look further into it, and also that there was some more information from the town hall tonight too. So we would like to put that off for to the next meeting until I've gotten more feedback from Attorney Long. The next item is new business, and the first item is Somerville Public School Policy Manual, and there are 2 policies for the first reading. So what that means is these are policies that the Rules Subcommittee has already worked on, and this is the language they have voted out, which will now be considered by the full school committee. And I know they are lengthy policies, but I think for the first reading, it's important to have the public hear them. Can I get someone to volunteer to read the first one and then someone to read the second? Dr. Ackman, would you like to read?
Sure, I'm happy to do either. I'm also happy to offer by means of explanation if there are any clarifying points. So as I just mentioned in my committee report, the JE attendance or temporary attendance addendum is intended to address attendance issues during the pandemic, and file EBC supplemental was voted out of committee with the intent of hopefully still making some changes to it, but the goal was to get in front of the full body as quickly as possible. EBC supplemental is something that was put out by MASC. We've added a little bit of language to it. It's intended to sort of touch on all of the policies that might be needed to be addressed by the superintendent during the pandemic. And the intent is sort of to give her and her staff authority to address these as they see fit and bring, as we mentioned, the important issues to a vote in front of school committee and the minor issues to address them themselves and to notify the school committee. So that's broadly what it is for, just because it is a very long policy. I am happy to read, I see that Ms. Barish is happy to read one, so I'm going to choose to read the shorter one to start and let her work her vocal cords on the longer one. So Ms. Barish, please get ready. That's what happens when you volunteer, right? So a policy, up here there's a mistake. It says JH is policy JE, the attendance addendum. I'll submit a corrected one. All Somerville Public Schools students are expected to attend and engage in all synchronous and asynchronous activities designed by their teachers for the full school day. SPS teachers in pre-K through 8 will take attendance during homeroom daily and report in Aspen. All teachers must enter virtual present or virtual absent in Aspen each day for every student. Pre-K to 8 teachers will also take attendance during each learning block and keep an electronic record of student attendance. Attendance for high school students will be taken daily at the beginning of period 1 and at the beginning of every academic class block during the school day. In addition, Somerville Public School educators will monitor whether students are present asynchronously, for example, submitting assignments online, logging into online learning platforms, and attending virtual check-ins during remote learning. In the case of illness, parents and caregivers must call the school sick line to report a student absence. The contact information can be found towards the bottom of each school's website homepage. And after 3 days of consecutive absences due to sickness, parents, caregivers must submit a doctor's note electronically to the school office. Throughout periods of synchronous learning, SPS educators will observe for students' presence. If it is observed that the student is not continuously present, the educator will contact the building redirect teacher or dean of students for follow-up action. The redirect teacher or dean of students will contact the student's parent caregiver to support getting the student back online. If a student is consistently absent and does not respond to outreach by the classroom teacher, the school redirect teacher or dean of students, that student will be referred to the school's student support team for further support. It was passed out of Rules Subcommittee on September 16th.
Thank you for that. And then Ms. Barish, Superintendent Skipper.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this, that the virtual present and the virtual absent are new codes that the Department of Ed have added this year, thus the need for us to be able to modify the policy. Procedurally, this is pretty similar to what we do now. At the high school, it's identical. In the case of the K-8s, the only real difference is that typically teachers are taking visual attendance. So because they're with students for the day, so they're making sure as kids are coming in that the student is present. This here is just asking them to keep an electronic record of that attendance, which is again something the Department of Ed is asking. So those are really the changes to it. And again, the change of coding virtual present and virtual absent is necessitated. That is how students will be identified in the collection to SIMS by Department of Ed.
Thank you for that. Ms. Fatone, you have a question?
Yes, through you, Chair Norman. I don't know if this will go to the superintendent or to Dr. Ackman. I just had curious, is there a reason in the beginning of the policy we don't reference why this is being put in place? There's no reference to remote learning or COVID-19. Just
To the attendance,
but
attendance one or to the broader policy, Ms. Patone?
No, the attendance one. I mean, just like a little caveat at the end of the first paragraph saying during remote learning implemented in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, just because there's no context to it.
Sure.
I'm just
Yeah,
when we're cleaning it up.
Good point. We can make that note.
All right, so we will.
Sorry.
Okay, one moment. So we'll, when we see the policy again, there will be that introductory remark, but also to my colleagues, when at the second reading, before a vote, we can always amend it too. Ms. Fatone?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Norman. The second thing, just again, also just context, maybe just one little blurb about what synchronous and asynchronous learning are. I mean, we use these words a lot, but we don't actually put definitions down, and I think that would be good context.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Green, you have a question too?
Yeah, just a point of information. Is there anything in this policy that isn't required by DESE? Is there any, like, or is this just staying in compliance with DESE requirements?
So through you, Madam Chair, so it's a good question. Obviously, some of this is our own vernacular, like the Dean of Students, the redirects, some of these are the procedural. No, I mean, the main pieces to the Department of Ed is again, it's not an extensive guidance, but it's really about the coding, and then it's just about, multiple points of contact during the day, keeping a log, and relative to the asynchronous, looking at things like the submission of assignments online, or logging into particular applications that an educator may assign a student as a way to be able to measure asynchronous participation. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this policy, clarifying? Okay. Ms. Barish, would you be so kind as to read the second policy for the first reading?
I am happy to do that. I just want to double check because I think there are two similar policies in our handouts, and I just want to make sure that I read the correct version. I see EBC supplemental, and then I see MASC pandemic.
You want the EBC supplemental. The other one's the one I edited.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillips. Here we go. Let's see. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I thought I was ready. Let me try again. Okay. Policy issues for the pandemic. File EBC. Creation of a general interim policy on COVID-related issues. Supplemental. Oh, sorry. File EBC supplemental. The school committee takes note of the COVID-19 emergency, resulting disruption of the traditional school day and year, growing concerns of students, families, and the community, and the growing number of issues that will affect public education. Therefore, the school committee establishes an emergency interim policy to promote public safety and safety of students and faculty, maintain to the extent possible the high and efficient level of educational services, ensure support for students in general and in particular for those at highest risk educationally, as well as those at social and economic risk, and comply with the emergency orders of the governor and adhere to the extent possible to the guidance of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and other agencies of state and federal government, and expedite the safest strategy for returning students to school. The school committee will approve the final plan submitted to DESE, which will outline its strategy for returning students to school and will, in collaboration with the superintendent, make such modifications to the back to school plan and district policy, and will authorize the superintendent to suspend, revise, or create protocols to facilitate the safe return to school. The superintendent will designate the appropriate staff members to oversee the safe administration of COVID-related policies during the period of the pandemic emergency and shall make such recommendations to the school committee as needed. The school committee will authorize the superintendent to act expeditiously in executing the back-to-school plan in accordance with current law and regulation and will, where noted, authorize the superintendent to suspend, revise, or recommend policies, rules, and protocols as needed to serve the best interests and safety of students, their families, and the community. The superintendent will bring any substantial change of policy to vote for the school committee, while minor alterations to policy as warranted do not need to be brought to the school committee. The back-to-school plan shall constitute the policy of the school district during the pandemic emergency, and the superintendent shall exercise the authority provided in law to carry out the plan as needed. General district goals affected by the pandemic. The superintendent, with the advice and consent of the school committee, may suspend or modify individual district policies to address the COVID-19 emergency as declared by the governor. Such suspension of policy shall expire upon the end of the emergency as declared by the governor. The goal of of emergency pandemic policies shall be to ensure the safety and health of students, faculty, staff, and all persons who may come in contact with them. Provide the most effective educational services as possible to students under the circumstances. Authorize changes to operating protocols as needed to open and operate schools effectively from various venues or platforms. Conduct the district business and operational functions of the district as efficiently as possible. Allow the superintendent and staff to act quickly to carry out a back-to-school plan and facilitate the reestablishment of a safe and productive school day and year. Student assignment to schools, file JCA. Subject to the guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the superintendent may suspend or revise the assignment of students to schools, including the assignment of new students for such a period as the emergency declaration is in force. School calendar, file IC/ICA. Subject to the guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the provisions of collective bargaining agreements, the superintendent may suspend or revise the school calendar with the approval of the school committee. Class size, file IIB. In order to maintain healthy, safe, and effective classrooms, the superintendent may suspend district policy on class size, subject to the provisions of the collective bargaining agreements where applicable. Attendance, file JH. Subject to operative law and regulations, suspend, modify, or adapt policies related to student attendance, including the link between and absences when appropriate, including the link between attendance and grades, chronic absence policies, and accommodations for students requiring special placements. Time on learning, file IC/ICA and ID. Subject to the guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the provisions of collective bargaining agreements, the superintendent may suspend or amend requirements for time on learning for the duration of the COVID pandemic. Grading and retention, file IKE. In accordance with guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the superintendent may propose, subject to the approval of the school committee, modifications to the policy of the district for grading and retention of students. Local graduation requirements, file IKF. In accordance with guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and modifications to current regulation or law, the superintendent may propose, subject to the approval of the school committee, modifications to the policy of the district regarding graduation requirements. Duplicate statement in special education. Special education, file IHB, IHBA, IHBAA, IHBF. The superintendent and school committee should be mindful that attainment of a high school diploma may render certain students ineligible for further services. Discipline and suspension, expulsion with homeschooling rights, file JIC and JK. The back-to-school plan recommended by the superintendent and subject to the approval of the school committee shall contain protocols for serving students who are disciplined or suspended during the pandemic emergency. Further, the superintendent shall provide in these back-to-school plans provisions for students who were disciplined or suspended, or who may elect to remain at home under the provisions of the policies related to homeschooling, or who may elect remote learning in the interests of safety or health concerns. Exemptions for particular groups of students, i.e. use of masks for youngest use of masks for youngest children, high-risk students, file JL. The superintendent shall provide protocols to principals and teachers regarding students who may require special exemptions from health and safety standards during the pandemic emergency. Such protocols may address exemption for utilizing support animals. Job descriptions, file GCA. The superintendent may revise job descriptions for district staff, considering the provisions of current collective bargaining agreements, in order to secure the safety and health of students and staff, establish effective communications between school and community, maintain facilities, transport students as needed, provide food services, and acquire necessary materials to operate schools safely and securely during the pandemic. The superintendent will inform the school committee of any such changes. Any changes to job descriptions shall expire at the end of the declared emergency situation. Students at risk, JIE, JL, JLC, JLCC. During the COVID pandemic, the superintendent or principal of a school may revise or suspend provisions of policy to facilitate the education of students at risk or with special physical needs or their family caregivers, including, but not limited to, caring for or educating students with disabilities, illness, pregnancy, child rearing responsibilities, or special education needs consistent with law and regulation. Privacy of students, file JRA. During the pandemic, the rights to privacy held by students and their families shall not be abridged by the public schools. Such rights extend to the confidentiality of student academic records, health data, economic status, and other such information as may be considered confidential by law. Massachusetts law prohibits the recording of individuals without their permission. Similarly, students may not be recorded in classrooms by audio, visual, or remote means without the permission of parents or, if of age, by individual students. During periods of remote learning, the privacy of students participating in online classes shall not be violated by recording them without appropriate permissions. Pivoting back to remote learning or back to in-school instruction. The superintendent shall incorporate into the back-to-school plan protocols for modifying these plans, including addressing the needs of students who may require reversion from in-school to remote learning modalities because of the pandemic emergency. Homeschooling file IHBG, temporary. Homebound instruction file IHBF, e.g. students with physical disabilities, and remote instruction for students in quarantine. The back-to-school plan shall provide for students who are temporarily homebound due to illness, quarantine, or disability. Public safety officers, including the school resource officer, MOA with the local police. Subject to current law or regulation, the superintendent shall report to the school committee of any change in status of the school resource officer. If the district eliminates visitors to school during the school day, the SRO may be impacted. Eligibility for participation in extracurricular activities, including sports, file JJ. Subject to law, regulation, and standards established by the appropriate and legitimate regulatory body, the superintendent may propose changes to district protocols for participation in extracurricular activities, including sports, subject to the rules established by the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association. Attendance versus participation in events, file JH, and student athletic handbooks. Subject to law, regulation, or emergency declaration, the superintendent may propose protocols or modifications or suspensions of district policies regarding attendance by students or the public in school events, including but not limited to assemblies, sports events, large gatherings, or other programs. Visitors in schools and buildings, file KI. Subject to current emergency declarations, the superintendent may propose suspension or modification to district policies regarding visitors to school buildings during the school day and after school hours. Illness and contact tracing, file JLCC. Subject to the provisions of the back-to-school plan, the superintendent may establish protocols for tracking student contacts as a means of locating others from whom students may contract or expose other persons to the COVID-19. Such protocols will be consistent with law and regulation and be consistent with standards to protect the privacy of students, their families, and other persons. Transportation and busing, file EEA, EEAA, EEAEC, EEAG. Subject to current law and regulation, the superintendent may suspend or modify policies related to the transportation of students by the school district. Legal requirements relating to IEPs that contain transportation for students shall not be altered without the appropriate family consent. These modifications shall be consistent with the district back-to-school plan. Operations and plant maintenance, file EC, ECA. Subject to the provisions of law, regulation, and collective bargaining agreements, the superintendent may suspend or amend current policy to ensure the efficient operation of business functions and maintenance of school buildings and other such offices as the district maintains. And this last bit, I suspect, is a note, but it says possible need to add something on technology. That is all. I hope everyone is still with me.
Thank you so much for reading that. I would anticipate that we might waive the second reading at our next meeting, but I do think it's important to hear it and see it. So thank you so much. So the next item is B, the FY. Yes, I'm sorry. Someone has a question? Oh.
I do.
Mr. Green, please jump in. Thank you so much. Oh, and Sarah and Dr. Phillips has a comment. I'm sorry.
First, I want to commend Ms. Barish on her excellent reading and speaking voice. She should have considered a career in radio. But I do have a question. Sometimes in those, subsections, the grant is to the superintendent, and other times it's the superintendent with the consent of the school committee. And I was just curious to know what made the distinction between those two and why that might be?
Dr. Ackerman, as chair of rules, do you want to speak to the origin of this?
Sure. So, and this actually I think feeds in well to Dr. Phillips' hopefully imminent comment, is our goal was to get this in front of school committee as quickly as possible. We did not think the language in this was perfect. This is almost verbatim the language that came to us from the MASC sample policy. And we passed it out of subcommittee so that we could have a first reading. Dr. Phillips in that time has made some edits, but because the superintendent expressed urgency in getting some sort of policy such as this passed, we passed this version as it was taken from the MASC website out of subcommittee. And I'm going to lead into Dr. Phillips, who has done work on this and has some amendments that we will probably discuss next time, but has a version of this that sort of addresses those questions, if that makes sense. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Green?
That makes sense. I'd love to hear Dr. Phillips pseudo amendments.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that lead in, Mr. Green and Dr. Ackman. Just kind of as background, as Dr. Ackman said, we wanted to get this policy before everybody so that we could make changes, not let perfect be the enemy of good, and make changes together as a group. As background, like for my work, I spent a lot of time doing statistics, and we're always interrogating our measures and trying to figure out what's the signal and what's the noise. And in the policy as written by MASC, my read is that there is some very important signal and a lot of noise. And so the revisions that I did in the version that's titled MASC Pandemic with SP Edit at the end is trying to get rid of the noise. And the noise that I saw was, it seems like there's a lot of guidance in the MASC policy, so I tried to strip that out. There's a lot of confusion in terms of kind of the things that Mr. Green was pointing out. Sometimes it requires the advice and consent of the school committee, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it requires that the superintendent pay attention to regulations, sometimes legislation, sometimes collective bargaining agreements. And it wasn't really clear what the change was. So in the version that I revised and that we added to the packet, it tries to strip out all the noise. I tried really hard not to edit the policy. Like, I think there's further changes we should make, but I tried to just cut out the guidance, streamline what the superintendent has to check. And so it's there for your review. I'm not quite sure what the next step is. So hopefully you can help me there, Chair or Dr. Ackman.
Well, first of all, thank you for the rules subcommittee for doing this so efficiently, but also thank you, Dr. Phillips, for then taking the time to refine it and to clarify it. So what I would hope, if we could submit that for the next meeting, is that are there two versions? So there's the one that's straight up from MASC, and then there is your version. And so what I would like, maybe we entitle yours, so Sarah, with edits, to have both of those policies in the packet for the next time, and we can decide to approve one or the other, or to work, take one and amend that. And but I think it would be very helpful to see both of them, mostly in just what you were saying. How do you go through a document and pull out the noise versus the signals? And I think that is very helpful. I think MASC is trying to cover everything possible, and sometimes it's not always clear. So if we could have both of those versions to look at beforehand, and then at our next meeting, I think I would entertain a motion to well, let's look at that, whether we amend it or whether we just wholesale vote one down and then work on the other. So yes, Dr. Phillips, by all
Just
means,
to
jump in.
clarify, they're both in the packet now, in case anyone didn't have a chance to look at both in advance of this meeting. I'm assuming since it's already in this week's packet, it'll be in the packet for the next meeting.
Yes,
It's
you
fine.
know what?
Just flagging that it's there. It's the one MASD pandemic specific.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I can say that that was lost on me, but that is very, very helpful. And so we've just had a reading. We haven't had any motion to go vote on either of them. So that gives us more flexibility. So thank you very much for that clarification. Does anyone else want to make a comment or have a question on this? Okay, so both of those will be up for the second reading at the May 5th school committee. We are now on to item C, donations, and I would be happy to entertain a motion. Oh, diplomas, excuse me. Wow. Item number B, FY20 scale and ADP diplomas. Can I get a motion on that?
Yes. I move to approve the FY20 scale ADP diplomas for Ronald Omar Santos Morales in Somerville, Samia Shaib from Somerville, and Ellie Daniel Bion from Somerville.
Andre
Can I
Green,
get
I
a second? Thank you so much, Mr. Green, for seconding that motion. Is there any discussion? Can we get a roll call votes on approving those diplomas?
Can I just ask a quick question, Carrie?
Sure, of course.
Do we have scale graduates all through the year? Are there specific times that they happen? Just curious.
Oh, that's a great question.
Any time, or is there like, stuff?
Superintendent?
Sure,
please
through
speak to
Madam Chair, as they actually meet their requirements. Same with ELP.
Okay.
So yeah. So
it can happen anytime, and that's great. And congratulations. And yes, so I was just curious. Thank you.
So that's always good to clarify. And then as they graduate throughout the year, they're all invited to the celebration and the graduation at the end of the year. Fantastic. So with that, there is a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Mr. Green. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
for Dr. Phillips,
Sorry, yes.
Ms. Krepshin,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone, Ms. Parrish,
Yes.
Ms. Patone,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
Ms. Norman,
Absolutely, yes.
passes. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Next item is item C, donations. Can I get a motion, please?
I move to accept the superintendent's recommendation to accept with gratitude the following donations. $400 in cash to from the Somerville High School Track Pack to the Somerville High School Athletics Scholarship Fund, and 385 supply kits valued at $2,965 from Staples, donated to Somerville Public School students.
Second.
And who was that who seconded the motion, please?
Eleanor Barish.
Thank you, Ms. Barish. There is a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Barish. Is there any discussion? Can I get a roll call vote on that too, please?
I think Mr. Green, you have a question?
I think that was from before. Mr. Green, was that question from before?
It was indeed.
On the previous, thank you so much. Can we get a roll call vote on the approval of donations?
Certainly. Dr. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Krepshin,
Yes.
President McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone, Ms. Barish,
Yes.
Ms. Patone,
Yes.
Dr. Ackman,
Yes.
and Ms. Norman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Skipper. did you want to say anything?
I did. I actually wanted to mention the Staples donation. We really appreciated the kits. These were back to school kits that contain school supplies for our students. Ms. Santiago and I picked the kits up, but there was a team of people that worked back at Edgerly to put the kits together and to ensure that we could give them out. So Ms. Santiago played a pretty big lead role in this. So a big public thank you to her and to Stephanie from Special Education, and to our attendance officers, Matt and Jen, as well as Lynn Doncaster. So it really was a team effort to get the kids out to the school. Ms. Santiago really spearheaded it. So just wanted to say a big thank you to her.
Huge. Ms. Santiago not only keeps everything moving, but has always, whatever has been asked of her, same true of Matt and Jen, and also Stephanie. They all were at Edgerly and helped in, and it was no small feat. And we also want to thank Staples for donating it. It does take a village to get kids crayons. I think that's what we've learned. So thank you so much, especially Ms. Santiago. Are there items from board members? Hearing Mr. Mazza and then Mr. Green.
Through you, Chair Norman, I just have an answer to that question about the teacher mentors. And I just wanted to publicly say it's for 1 year. It's for this year only right now, the teacher mentor program.
Thank you so much for that clarification and that bit of information. Mr. Green?
I just want to make sure we took a moment on this second day of school to really thank the teachers who are, busting their butts to make remote learning as good as possible, and have to do it with the unfortunate, especially for those who are parents of little kids, who have to do it with parents watching in a way that, allows for some, tripping from the cheap seats that might otherwise be happening. And I want to especially contrast that with hybrid, the schools that are currently doing hybrid, which are, also learning as they go and oftentimes making mistakes. But since parents aren't in the room, those mistakes aren't as visible. So I want to thank our teachers. I want to be cognizant of the fact that 2 days in, they've done a great job, but this is still very much on the learning curve. And I want to encourage everyone to be patient as we figure out how to do this as well as possible, because even when we start a hybrid thing, the remote learning piece will be a huge part. 3 days of a student's education will still be remote. It's important that we take this time to learn how to do it right.
Thank you for that. And I could not agree with you more. I have heard from a lot of parents, and it has been overwhelming, the amount of gratitude and the towards teachers, and said, this one went above and beyond, and here's what this one did. And it is incredible. I have a high schooler, so that's the world I'm in. That high school orientation on Thursday, it was to be able to make remote physics seem not only doable but exciting. It was really quite something, and I as a parent am very grateful, because it means a lot. These all of our educators are such important adults in our kids' lives, so thank you for that. Any other, Dr. Ackman, are there condolences?
There are not.
There are not. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.